Transit-Oriented Development, or TOD, means building at scale near transport infrastructure. It's an approach that's been used for decades with success in countries like Japan, Sweden and France, among others. To explore how this might work in Ireland, after considering 8 different locations in the Greater Dublin area, we chose Sallins Naas train station, which contains a greenfield site of 37 hectares to the southeast, all within 10 minutes walk of the station. In our view, this area makes for a good TOD candidate because Sallins Naas is a short commute of 20 to 30 minutes from Dublin's Euston station, and the site is close to the M7 motorway, giving it good road connectivity. According to author Sean Keyes, this rail corridor from Euston to the west and southwest is a zone of high growth potential for Ireland.
The TOD corridor that seems most promising to me is, and it looks like it's in West Dublin. There's rail lines going up to sort of Selbridge in the west, and there's a rail line going down to Naas and then onwards to Cork. The one that goes down to Cork, it's double tracked, and that's important because it means you can have intercity lines down to Cork and Limerick and the rest, and that they can run as normal. The other line can just be a local line. When you've got a dedicated local line, there is the potential to make a dedicated metro system with which you can move like very, very large numbers of people. It runs through greenfields for 20 kilometres once it goes beyond Downtown, beyond the M50. So it's quite close to the city. The commuting distance wouldn't be long.
Housing and commercial space have a symbiotic relationship with rail, since the more housing and jobs located along a rail line, the more viable rail becomes, and the more frequent the trains can be. And having a rail station with good connectivity increases the attractiveness of an area, while reducing its dependence on cars. When designing such a TOD system, it is good practice not to have all the jobs at one end of the line and the houses at the other, so as to balance passenger demand in both directions. This doesn't mean that each station along a TOD corridor needs to have both jobs and housing, but they should at least be interspersed. Some stops may have more jobs, others may have more housing. With track improvements, rail scales well with density, because as a mode of transport, rail has a very high throughput. One commuter rail line has the carrying capacity of roughly 20 lanes of motorway, since it allows large numbers of people to board and disembark at once, and trains can be scheduled to run as often as every 2 minutes. The area we chose near Sallins Naas is agricultural land that's marked by a cluster of trees to the south, as well as lines of mature trees within, both of which we sought to retain. Good TOD practice says that the highest density buildings should be located closest to the station. With this in mind, we designed a mix of residential, commercial and office space, densifying most heavily near the station, with commercial concerns on the ground floor. Prioritising mixed use, gentle density with subtle ornamentation can achieve impressive capacity in a small space, while helping reduce the strength of local objections, since its modest proportions and aesthetic touches will add to the attractiveness of the wider area, not diminish it. The busiest part of the development is this street to the west, where we included a hotel and other high-density buildings, with a mix of functions and our usual preference for balconies and mansard roofs. As we move away from the station, we included a large park with a pond and amenities, such as cafes and playgrounds, which would be used by new residents as well as existing residents of Sallins Naas. The park is adjoined by 6-storey buildings, with commercial concerns on the ground floor, and throughout the development we placed pedestrians and cyclists at the heart of our plans, with cars having a somewhat curtailed role. Car-based travel remains the most popular choice of transport for people in the area, accounting for 67% of all journeys. While a TOD may increase the use of public transport at the expense of cars, in our view it's important to be realistic and not try to design cars out of the system entirely. The main public building is a library, just off the park, with 2 rows of housing on either side. As a centrepiece, we played with the idea of including a statue of a horse, given the tradition of horse racing in Kildare, but instead went with an oak tree to reflect the county's name Kildare, which means Church of the Oak. As we move to the south, densities gradually drop off, and the development becomes more residential, and in the areas furthest from the station, the densities drop to 2-storey housing. And at the southern end, we included a school, complete with a running track. This TOD has the potential to accommodate up to 5,000 people in this area alone, within easy reach of Dublin, which would alleviate the capital's housing shortage by providing an alternative place to live. Some people might take exception to building on greenfield rather than brownfield, but it doesn't need to be either or. And building with density on greenfield reduces the pressure on our towns and cities to sprawl outwards. Additionally, development at scale in this area would be easier, faster and cheaper than a city redevelopment, which would likely be met with more objections, more site constraints and more delays. For example, Limerick is undertaking a regeneration project near Colbert Station to create up to 2,800 homes, but with an estimated completion date of 2035 all going well, it's just an inescapable fact that building within cities is slower and more expensive. In our view, TOD represents our best chance of building at scale within years and not decades, and finally getting out ahead of our housing shortages. As a location, we think Sallins is a great place to live, and its location on the planned Grand Canal Greenway will increase the town's attractiveness for visitors, residents and businesses. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the subject of transit-oriented development, your feedback on our designs, and what you would do differently. Would you like to live in this area? In future videos, we'll be looking at the feasibility of TODs in other counties around Ireland, so we welcome any ideas you might have. And as always, please subscribe if you'd like to see more from us. Slán go fóill.